Please stop kicking me." A young waitress trembled under the table as a powerful CEO humiliated her in front of everyone. No one dared to stand up until a quiet millionaire walked in, saw everything, and changed her life forever. What happened next left the entire restaurant speechless. Please stop kicking me." The trembling voice cut through the restaurant like a knife. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't even meant to draw attention. But it did. Every head turned. Forks paused midair. Conversations died halfway through sentences. Even the soft jazz playing overhead suddenly felt out of place. And there, standing in the far corner near table 14, was Tiana, the young black waitress everyone in the restaurant knew by her warm smile, her gentle laugh, and her habit of remembering every regular's order. But this time, she wasn't smiling. Her hands shook as she clutched her order pad, knuckles turning pale against her dark skin. Her eyes glistened with a mix of fear, humiliation, and disbelief. Across from her sat a sharply dressed man in a navy suit, silver cufflinks, and a gold watch that screamed power. A man whose presence demanded attention from the moment he walked in. Gregory Shore, CEO, tech giant, media favorite. A man whose face had appeared on business magazines and morning shows. A man who thought the world belonged to him. He tilted his head lazily, looking up at her like she was an annoyance rather than a human being. "Did you say something?" he asked, voice smooth like poison. Tiana swallowed hard. Her voice cracked as she repeated, slightly louder this time, "Please stop kicking me under the table." In the span of a single second, the entire atmosphere changed. A customer gasped. A couple stopped eating. Even the cooks behind the counter lifted their heads. But Gregory just leaned back, lips curling into a smirk that didn't reach his eyes. "Maybe," he said slowly, tapping his polished shoe against the floor, "you shouldn't walk so close to my table." He waved his hand dismissively. Clumsy people always cause problems. A couple of nearby customers exchanged uncomfortable glances. Some lowered their heads. Some pretended not to hear. Not because they agreed with Gregory, but because everyone knew who he was, and no one dared challenge a man who could destroy a career with a single phone call. The silence became heavier. Tiana looked around, hoping anyone, would say something. But people avoided her gaze. She felt her cheeks burn with humiliation. She blinked away tears, trying to maintain the small shred of dignity she had left. She took a shaky step back. I didn't do anything to you," she whispered. Gregory scoffed. "Oh, please. I saw you spill water on the floor earlier. You're careless. Every restaurant has one." He sipped his drink without breaking eye contact. "You're welcome, by the way. Most people wouldn't even let you serve them." Tiana's breath hitched. Her chest tightened. Her eyes blurred. She felt smaller and smaller by the second. No one had spoken to her like that in years. Not since her old job. Not since the manager who would accidentally bump her trays out of her hands. Not since the customers who assumed they could treat her any way they wanted. She thought she had left that behind. But today it was back. She tried stepping away, but Gregory's foot shot out again. Not enough to injure. Just enough to make her flinch. Just enough to send a message. "You are beneath me." She winced and closed her eyes for a moment, as if bracing herself. A few tables away, a couple whispered, "Isn't that Gregory Shore?" "Yeah, the guy from Horizon Tech. I heard he's difficult." Difficult wasn't the word. But no one wanted to say the real word. Bullies rarely get called bullies when they're rich. And Gregory Shore was very rich. The staff glanced nervously from behind the counter. The manager peeked around the corner, unsure whether to intervene. Everyone was watching, but no one was acting. Everyone except one man. At table 7, a tall man with warm brown skin slowly put down his fork. He had been watching since the moment Tiana's voice cracked across the restaurant. He didn't look away. He didn't pretend he didn't hear. He didn't hesitate. His name was Isaiah Ward, though most people didn't recognize him. And that's exactly how he preferred it. A quiet millionaire. A man who invested in communities, not corporations. A man who built youth centers and funded shelters while staying out of the spotlight. Isaiah wasn't flashy. He didn't flaunt his wealth. He didn't wear designer suits or gold watches. But he carried something no amount of money could buy: human decency. And right now, that decency burned through him like fire. His jaw tightened. His eyes narrowed on Gregory. His hands curled slowly, not into fists, but into resolve. Because Isaiah had seen this before. He had grown up watching people like his mother and aunties being talked down to, being belittled, being treated like they didn't belong. His chest rose and fell slowly as he exhaled. Enough was enough. Meanwhile, Tiana tried to steady herself. Her voice quivered as she whispered, "I'm just trying to do my job." Gregory rolled his eyes. "And failing miserably. Maybe try being more." That's when Isaiah pushed his chair back. The screech of wood on tile cut sharply through the room. Heads turned again. Tiana lifted her eyes and saw him, the only person who hadn't looked away. Isaiah rose to his full height, calm, tall, composed, and walked toward the scene with slow, deliberate steps. Customers shifted in their seats. The manager peeked over the counter again. Even Gregory paused mid-sentence, eyebrows raised in confusion. Isaiah stopped right beside Tiana. His voice was gentle, but firm. "Are you okay?" Tiana blinked, overwhelmed by the kindness in his tone. People didn't usually ask that question, especially not strangers. Her lips trembled. I don't want trouble," she whispered. "Please, it's fine." Isaiah shook his head slightly. "No, it's not fine." He turned his head toward Gregory. And for the first time since walking into the restaurant, Gregory's smirk faltered. Because Isaiah wasn't looking at him with fear. He was looking at him with truth, the one thing powerful bullies hate the most. Isaiah's voice was steady, controlled, almost too calm. "I saw everything." The entire restaurant went silent. Gregory leaned back slowly, arms crossing. "Oh really?" he said. "And who exactly are you?" Isaiah held his gaze, just long enough for the answer to settle in the air. "Someone," he said quietly, "who doesn't tolerate cruelty." And in that moment, the balance of the room shifted. The fear that once hovered over Tiana began to crack. The tension that Gregory once controlled began to slip from his hands. Because someone finally had stood up. And the story had only just begun. Tiana wasn't just any waitress. She was a single mother, a woman who carried the weight of the world on her shoulders while managing a smile that could light up even the dreariest morning. Her 6-year-old son, Malik, depended on her for everything: food, comfort, love, and safety. She often sacrificed sleep, skipped meals, and worked double shifts just to make sure he had a better life. Every day, she greeted customers warmly, memorized their orders, and carried trays heavy with food and drinks without complaint. Even when a customer snapped at her for the tiniest mistake or muttered a racial slur under their breath, she smiled. Because she knew anger never solved anything, and she had to stay employed to survive. But today, everything changed. Because today, Gregory Shore decided to push her past a point of endurance. It started subtly. Every time Tiana leaned forward to place a plate on his table, she felt a hard kick to her shin under the cloth. At first, she thought she had misstepped. But when it happened a second time, and then a third, her stomach sank with realization. It wasn't an accident. The kicks grew harder. "You bruising already?" Gregory mocked, his tone dripping with contempt. "Skin too sensitive?" Tiana's hand shook. Her apron was clutched so tightly that the cloth creased under her fingers. She took a step back, trying to regain balance, not just physically, but emotionally. I didn't do anything to you," she whispered, her voice breaking, small and almost inaudible over the clatter of dishes and hum of conversation. Gregory leaned back, smirking. His expression was a mixture of amusement and malice. "Exactly," he said, slow and deliberate. "You should be grateful someone like me even notices your existence." Her heart pounded, her chest felt tight, and a wave of panic rose in her throat. It wasn't just embarrassment, it was fear. Fear of losing her job, fear of the humiliation, fear of being invisible and disposable in a world that already seemed stacked against her. She tried to steady her breath. She tried to remind herself, this is just one person, One bad, cruel person. I've faced worse. But Gregory wasn't done. By now, the tension in the restaurant had become palpable. Other customers had begun to notice. A few glanced over their menus nervously. Some whispered to each other. But no one spoke up. Because Gregory Shore wasn't just anyone. He was the owner of Horizon Tech, a multi-billion-dollar company. He had media presence, social power, and connections that could ruin careers with the flick of a pen. The restaurant staff knew it, the manager knew it, and Tiana knew it. But none of that made the humiliation any less real. Finally, the manager approached, pale and hesitant. He swallowed hard as he walked toward Gregory's table. "Sir, is there a problem?" the manager asked, voice trembling slightly. Gregory waved him off impatiently. "Yeah, your server is clumsy. Spilling water everywhere. Maybe you should replace her." The words landed like hammers in Tiana's chest. Replace her. As if she were nothing more than a disposable object. The manager looked helpless. His eyes darted toward Tiana, who was trembling at the edge of a scene, but he said nothing. He knew better. Everyone knew Gregory donated thousands to the restaurant owner each year. Everyone knew a single word against him could cost them their jobs, or worse. Tiana's hands trembled so violently that she almost dropped the tray she was holding. Her face burned red, and tears began to threaten the corners of her eyes. She clenched her jaw and tried to steady herself. But she didn't have to, because somewhere in the back of the room, someone saw everything. Isaiah Ward. Isaiah had been sitting quietly at a corner table, his fork abandoned halfway to his mouth, his gaze fixed on Tiana. The moment he saw Gregory kick her under the table, he knew he couldn't remain a passive observer. He had seen bullies before. He had grown up in neighborhoods where people like Gregory Shore thrived by making others feel small. But he had also learned that power meant nothing without conscience. Isaiah watched as Tiana flinched at another kick, her voice quivering as she tried to defend herself, and something in him snapped. He didn't speak yet. He didn't move yet. But his jaw tightened. His hands curled into calm, determined fists. His eyes burned with resolve. Gregory, of course, remained oblivious. He leaned back, checking his watch, clearly enjoying the sense of control he thought he had. "You don't belong here," he said coldly to Tiana. "This is a place for people who know their place, not clumsy little girls trying to serve food." Tiana's chest tightened further. She swallowed hard, forcing herself to breathe, trying to block out the voices around her, trying to block out the shame and pain. She had faced so much in her life, yet this humiliation was unbearable. And yet, despite the fear, a tiny spark of hope flickered in her heart. Because somewhere in the room, someone noticed her. Someone who could see the injustice, who could see the pain, and who could do something about it. Isaiah's presence was quiet but electric. He didn't frown. He didn't shout. He didn't judge. He just watched and waited. And in that silence, Tiana felt something she hadn't felt in a long time, a chance that someone might actually stand up for her. Gregory smirked one last time before leaning back, confident that he had won. He didn't know that his arrogance was about to meet its match, because Isaiah Ward had seen enough, and he had no intention of staying silent. This extended version emphasizes Tiana's background, struggles, and humanity, Gregory's cruelty and sense of entitlement, the restaurant's tension and atmosphere, Isaiah's calm but firm observation, the rising sense that something is about to happen. It sets the stage perfectly for the next section, where Isaiah finally intervenes. Isaiah stood slowly, deliberately, like a man who had waited a lifetime for the right moment to act. Every eye in the restaurant followed him, though he made no effort to draw attention. His movements were calm, controlled, yet carried the weight of absolute authority. He walked straight toward Tiana, his steps measured, purposeful. She flinched slightly, afraid this stranger might make things worse, but there was something in his eyes, a quiet, unwavering intensity, that made her pause. When he lowered himself onto the chair beside her, she finally dared to look up. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice low, steady, and gentle. There was no judgment in it, only concern. Tiana tried to smile, a small, fragile thing. I'm fine. Please don't get involved, she whispered, almost pleading. But Isaiah shook his head, a faint frown creasing his brow. No, he said firmly. Respect isn't optional. It's the minimum. And no one should have to beg for it. The words were soft, but they carried an invisible weight. A hush fell over the restaurant. The chatter of lunchtime customers ceased. Even the cooks behind the counter froze mid-motion, knives in hand, as if the very air had shifted. Isaiah turned toward Gregory Shore, who had been reclining in his chair, fingers tapping the table with condescending amusement. The smirk on Gregory's face faltered slightly, though he tried to maintain his air of superiority. I saw what you did, Isaiah said, his voice calm but unmistakably sharp. Gregory chuckled, leaning back as if dismissing the statement. And who exactly are you, he asked, his tone equal parts curiosity and condescension. Isaiah didn't flinch. He reached for a nearby chair and pulled it out with quiet precision, sitting directly across from Gregory. The restaurant seemed to shrink around them. Every pair of eyes in the room was glued to the tense tableau unfolding in front of them. I'm someone who doesn't tolerate cowards, Isaiah said evenly. His gaze locked onto Gregory's. The silence that followed was almost unbearable. Customers held their breath. The clinking of silverware against plate ceased. Even the faint hum of the air conditioner seemed to vanish. Gregory scoffed, leaning forward slightly. You must not know who I am. Isaiah tilted his head slightly, his expression one of calm awareness. Oh, I do, he replied. His voice remained soft, but every word landed like a hammer. You're a CEO who thinks money gives you permission to abuse people. And right now you're proving it. Gregory laughed, a loud, dismissive sound that echoed through the room. Please. She's a waitress. That's her job. If she can't handle a little pressure. Isaiah's hand shot out, cutting him off mid-sentence. Kicking someone under a table isn't pressure. It's harassment. Plain and simple. And don't you dare try to justify it. A few people gasped audibly. Whispers ran through the crowd. Did he just say that to Gregory Shore? Some pulled out phones, quietly recording. Others leaned forward, sensing a confrontation that would be talked about long after lunchtime ended. Isaiah reached into his pocket and pulled out a crisp, white business card. Without a hint of hesitation, he placed it directly on the table between them. Gregory leaned forward, curiosity overtaking his smirk. His fingers hovered over the card before finally picking it up. As he read the name printed neatly in bold letters. Isaiah Ward, Ward Foundation's Millionaire Investor. The smirk on Gregory's face faltered, fading into something akin to unease. His confident, untouchable air wavered, just for a fraction of a second. He shifted slightly in his chair, suddenly aware that the man sitting across from him had influence and power he could not immediately dismiss. Isaiah leaned forward, his tone gentle but unwavering. In every room, there's always someone richer, someone kinder, and someone willing to stand up to men like you. The entire restaurant seemed to hold its breath. Customers watched, frozen mid-bite, as the tension escalated. Tiana's hands gripped her apron tightly, trying to hold back tears. For the first time that day, she felt a spark of hope. Someone had seen her, truly seen her. Someone had her back. Gregory swallowed, trying to regain composure. His voice, when it came, was tight, a little less confident than before. And you think you can lecture me? Isaiah smiled faintly, not arrogantly, but with quiet certainty. I'm not lecturing you. I'm showing you the difference between wealth and decency. One can have millions and still be small. One can have nothing and still be great. Right now, you're showing the world exactly which side you're on. Gregory opened his mouth to respond, but no words came. The room was too silent. The staff behind the counter peeked nervously from the kitchen, while a few customers nodded subtly, silently cheering for Tiana. Isaiah continued, his voice unwavering. Tiana doesn't have to beg for respect, and neither does anyone else. And if you think wealth or power gives you the right to humiliate someone beneath you, well, you've learned, the hard way, that not everyone stays silent. Not anymore. The power in the room had shifted. Gregory's confidence wavered. The smirk that had defined him vanished, replaced by an uneasy awareness of his own wrongs. He shuffled in his seat, suddenly small in the presence of a man who wielded power with integrity. Isaiah leaned back slightly, giving Tiana a reassuring glance. Her hands unclenched slightly, her shoulders began to relax, and her breath came more steadily. The silence stretched for several heartbeats. And then slowly, the restaurant exhaled with them. Conversations resumed, though quietly. Forks clinked against plates, chairs scraped against tile. But the energy in the room had changed. It was no longer fear, it was awe. Respect. Justice, if only for a moment, had been served. Gregory Shore, for the first time that day, realized something he hadn't before. Money can buy a lot of things, but it can't buy courage, decency, or the moral high ground. And Isaiah Ward had just reminded him of that, in front of everyone. Before Gregory could even gather his words to respond, Isaiah stood. Calm, deliberate, his posture commanding but not aggressive. The entire restaurant seemed to pause. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Silverware froze halfway to mouths. Even the soft hum of the air conditioning seemed to vanish. Isaiah turned to the manager. "Sir," he said firmly, "I'd like to file a complaint." The manager blinked, pale and uncertain. His hands fidgeted. Against Mr. Shore? Isaiah's gaze didn't waver. "No," he said evenly, "against anyone who thinks this woman is disposable." Tiana's lips trembled. She felt a mix of disbelief and cautious hope. Could someone actually stand up for her? Someone who wasn't afraid? The room had grown heavy with tension. Customers craned their necks to watch. Gregory, sitting rigidly, let out a short, incredulous laugh. "Are you serious?" he sneered. "You're filing a complaint against me?" Isaiah turned slowly toward him, calm but unflinching. "Yes. Because kicking someone, mocking someone, or belittling them is unacceptable. No exceptions." Gregory scoffed, still trying to hold onto control. "I can do whatever I want. This is my seat, my table. I pay for my meals here. That waitress should know her place." Isaiah didn't flinch. Instead, he did something no one expected. He rolled up his pant leg, revealing a prosthetic limb, sleek, polished, a reminder of resilience. The restaurant fell utterly silent. Some diners gasped quietly. Others couldn't look away. "I lost my leg 11 years ago," Isaiah said softly, but each word carried immense weight. "And before that, people thought it was acceptable to shove past me, insult me, mock me, treat me like I was nothing." A soft murmur ran through the room. Tiana's hands clenched at her sides. She felt a shiver run down her spine, the kind that comes when someone speaks truth with unshakable conviction. The silence was so complete that Gregory's own breathing sounded loud in the quiet room. Isaiah's voice cut through it, steady, unwavering. "I swore I would never let someone else feel that kind of pain if I could stop it." He lifted his hand and pointed directly at Gregory. "You kicked her because you saw someone you thought was weaker than you. But what you didn't see was her strength." Tiana's eyes widened. She had never heard anyone speak so openly, so courageously, on her behalf. Her lips trembled, and she swallowed hard, feeling tears prick at the corners of her eyes. Isaiah's voice grew firmer. "This woman works harder in a single day than you do in a week. She doesn't hide behind titles. She doesn't hide behind money. And she definitely doesn't hide behind tables while attacking people." The room began to stir. Customers nodded subtly, some whispering in agreement. "He's right, she's amazing. That man is cruel." A few diners pulled out their phones, quietly recording the scene. They sensed history happening, a moment of moral reckoning that could not be ignored. Gregory's face turned red, not from exertion, but from the sudden, undeniable weight of accountability. He shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Sweat formed at his temples, despite the air conditioning. The confidence, the arrogance, the smirk he had worn all day vanished. "This is ridiculous," he barked, trying to reclaim control. "I'm leaving." Isaiah smiled, almost imperceptibly, calm as a still lake. "No," he said. His tone wasn't loud, but it carried absolute authority. "You're apologizing." Gregory froze. His jaw tightened. His fingers fidgeted with the corner of the menu. For the first time that day, he felt powerless. The room's eyes were on him. The customers, the staff, the manager, even Tiana, trembling beside him, waiting for justice, were all watching. Isaiah leaned forward slightly, locking eyes with Gregory. "Not because she needs it," he said slowly, emphasizing every word, "but because you do." The words hit harder than any insult. They echoed in the quiet restaurant, bouncing off the walls, sinking into Gregory's ego like stones into water. He opened his mouth, but no words came. He stuttered, glanced around, and realized that his usual tactics, intimidation, money, reputation, held no sway here. The room seemed to collectively exhale. A soft applause started, tentative at first, then louder as other diners joined in. Staff members peered from behind counters, nodding subtly. Even the few brave customers recording on their phones whispered their support, murmuring. Finally, someone stood up to him. Gregory's face flushed crimson. He opened his mouth again, muttered something barely audible, and finally, in a trembling, forced tone, offered an apology. I apologize," he stammered. To Tiana. "I didn't mean." Isaiah's eyes never left him. "Say it properly," he instructed calmly, "and mean it." The apology came out haltingly, broken, but it was there. Gregory shuffled toward the door, muttering under his breath, and left, slamming it behind him. The room erupted, not in chaos, but in relief. Customers whispered praise. Staff members exchanged proud glances. And Tiana, she stood there, stunned, tears streaming down her face, her hands trembling as she gripped her apron. She looked at Isaiah, speechless. For the first time that day, she felt safe, seen, validated, and a spark of hope lit within her chest, a hope she hadn't felt in years. Isaiah bent slightly, offering her a reassuring nod. "No one should ever make you feel small," he said gently. "And no one should ever get away with thinking they can." The applause quieted, but the sense of justice, of courage, of right prevailing, lingered in the air. And in that moment, Tiana realized something profound. One man had tried to crush her spirit, but another had lifted it higher than she had ever imagined. The restaurant had witnessed it all. A single act of bravery, of integrity, had shifted the balance. And the memory of that moment, of Isaiah standing firmly while the CEO faltered, would stay with everyone present forever. This extended version emphasizes Isaiah's personal story and moral authority, Tiana's emotional arc and relief, Gregory's internal panic and loss of control, the restaurant's reactions, staff, customers, whispers, applause, the dramatic tension and moral lesson. After the chaos of the confrontation finally settled, the restaurant felt lighter, as if the tension had been physically lifted from the air. Customers whispered quietly to each other, some nodding in admiration, others shaking their heads in disbelief. The staff, who had watched in stunned silence, began quietly returning to their duties, but with a new sense of pride. Isaiah turned to Tiana, his eyes warm, steady, filled with kindness. "You should never have to beg someone to stop hurting you," he said gently, his voice soft but carrying the weight of truth. Tiana's lips trembled. Her hands, still clutching her apron, shook slightly as she tried to process everything that had just happened. For years, she had carried the heavy weight of invisible struggles, long hours, financial stress, the constant fear of not being enough, and the constant societal pressure that made her feel small. And yet, she had never dared to voice her frustration in such a public space. Now, tears she had been holding back for years began to spill. They rolled freely down her cheeks, warm and unstoppable. For the first time in a long time, she felt seen, truly seen. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible, trembling with raw emotion. "Nobody has ever stood up for me like that." Isaiah's smile was quiet but full of understanding. "You deserve more than survival, Tiana," he said, his tone almost like a promise. "You deserve a life where people see your worth and recognize your strength." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small, folded piece of paper. Tiana's eyes widened, curiosity and disbelief flashing across her face. Isaiah unfolded it carefully, holding it out to her. "I'm opening a new community-run cafe," he explained. "It's a place that values respect, dignity, and hard work. And I need a manager, someone strong, patient, and great with people. someone who can lead with empathy and care. Tiana's hands shook as she reached out to take the paper. "Are you serious?" she asked, her voice a mixture of hope and incredulity. Isaiah nodded. "Absolutely. You start Monday. Full benefits, flexible hours, a salary that will take care of you and Malik. No compromises. You won't just survive, you'll thrive." Tiana's tears fell harder this time. But these weren't tears of fear or pain. They were tears of relief, joy, and newfound hope. She could barely speak as emotions overcame her. Finally, she stepped forward and threw her arms around Isaiah, hugging him tightly. The entire restaurant erupted into spontaneous applause. Diners clapped, staff cheered softly, and a few of the customers wiped away tears themselves. The moment felt larger than life, as though the entire room had collectively witnessed a small miracle. Isaiah gently patted her shoulder and whispered, "Never let anyone like him make you feel small. The world changes when one brave person stands up, and today, that brave person was you." Tiana pulled back slightly, looking into his eyes. She nodded, feeling a surge of strength and determination she hadn't felt in years. That moment was more than just gratitude, it was a turning point. From that day forward, Tiana's life transformed in ways she had only dreamed about. Her son, Malik, now had access to a better school. No longer did she have to worry about him walking home alone or struggling in overcrowded classrooms. She could finally provide him with an environment where he could grow, learn, and thrive. She finally moved out of the cramped apartment she had been struggling in for years. The small space, with its peeling paint and drafty windows, had felt like a cage. Now, she had a bright, comfortable apartment with enough space for Malik to play, study, and feel safe. Every corner of the home reminded her that she had not just survived, but had begun to rebuild her life. The new cafe became more than a job. It became a sanctuary, a place where she could lead, inspire, and create an environment that celebrated hard work, kindness, and community. Customers noticed the difference immediately. Tiana's warmth, her patience, and her ability to make everyone feel welcome turned the cafe into a local favorite. And every day, when Tiana recounted the story to her friends or shared it with new employees, she ended with the same powerful reflection. "One man kicked me, but another helped me stand taller than ever." Those words became her mantra, a symbol of resilience and hope. They reminded her that cruelty may exist, but courage, kindness, and justice could prevail, even in the smallest, most unexpected ways. Sometimes, when Malik asked about that day at the restaurant, Tiana would kneel to his level, hold his hand, and say, "Never let anyone make you feel small, honey. If someone tries, you have the choice to be brave, and sometimes others will stand with you." Tiana's story spread quietly among friends, colleagues, and eventually the community. People were inspired by the courage it took to stand, the power of empathy, and the impact of one person choosing to act against injustice. Even years later, she carried the lesson with her. Life could be unfair, cruel, and harsh, but it could also be transformative. The difference between despair and hope, between invisibility and recognition, often came down to a single act of bravery. And in Tiana's case, that act didn't just change a moment. It changed her life forever. She no longer feared being unseen or underestimated. She no longer felt small in a world that often overlooked her worth. She had witnessed firsthand how integrity, courage, and empathy could topple arrogance and cruelty, and she had become a living testament to that truth. And so, every time Tiana smiled at a customer, every time she guided a new employee, and every time she told Malik the story of that day, she remembered the words Isaiah had whispered to her. "Today, the brave person was you." And she truly believed it. Sometimes, the smallest act of courage can change a life forever. One man tried to make her feel small, but another helped her stand taller than ever. Remember this: bravery and kindness have more power than money, fear, or cruelty. If this story moved you, like, share, and subscribe, because we all need heroes in our lives, and maybe you can be one too.